Yes, sorry, that was absent-minded.
Just a minute. Okay. We've got to take this at a canter, really, haven't we? There's quite a bit of ground to cover. Okay. So we do it, I think.
Completely.
Actually, to be honest with you, other than killing Peninsula, most of what he says in the statement we accept from now.
Yeah, I think that's right. HM seems to be, yeah. I'm not meant to for a full while.
I was going to say, that's not supposed to happen for a long time.
Mr. Mercer, I know you've had a little time over the lunch break to speak to your legal team and for them to have the opportunity to speak with you about this particular issue. I hope they've had some opportunity to explain to you a number of important facts. The first is that this inquiry, and I am wholly independent of government, of the MOD, of all the equal participants, and that I'm acting with the inquiry purely in the public interest. But I am wholly independent as a serving Lord Justice of Appeal, and I hope that is fully understood. Secondly, my job is to get to the truth of the allegations, one way or the other, as quickly as possible in the public interest. And to do this, I need the cooperation and proactive cooperation of everybody. And for those who come before the inquiry, to tell me everything that they know and not to hold back any detail, whether for their own purposes or because of some misplaced loyalty. Thirdly, I hope they've emphasized to you that the inquiry is very used to dealing with highly sensitive and highly confidential information. Indeed, information of the most sensitive type, which includes the security, the welfare, the well-being, and the confidentiality of witnesses. And indeed, I have already issued numerous restriction orders to that very effect, because I and the inquiry fully appreciate the difficulties that there are, and that it is extremely important that witnesses who come forward, or those who are asked for information or come forward with it, are treated with the utmost care. So you, and indeed everyone, can have complete confidence in the inquiry, and that the information that's given to the inquiry, the names and so on, that are provided to the inquiry in confidence, will be treated in confidence by me and the inquiry team, and with the very greatest care. There is nothing for you or anybody to worry about when they come forward. And as you will have heard this morning, the inquiry has set up a number of extremely secure methods of individuals getting in touch with the inquiry direct, and many have already. This has been, I know, a busy day with lots of questions and lots of evidence. And I'm prepared, because I want to get on with the rest of your evidence today, to give a little bit more time for you to discuss these issues, in particular to discuss these important points that I have made just now, which I would like you profoundly to understand, and indeed everyone who gets in touch with the inquiry and responds indeed to my further call for evidence, that they can have complete confidence in the integrity of the inquiry, the desire of the inquiry to take the utmost care with all those who come forward and their well-being, but also to have no doubt as to the determination of the inquiry to get to the bottom of these allegations as quickly as possible, one way or the other, true or untrue, in the public interest, so that I can make any recommendations that need to be done and that everybody can move on. So I'm going to park this issue briefly. I'd like you to have some further discussions with your legal team and for them to have discussions with you about this. It is a very, very sensitive, difficult issue that I am dealing with, And I want everybody to understand that I fully appreciate the emotions involved, the camaraderie involved, all these other issues, some of which you've touched on this morning, if I may say so, very eloquently. But it is very important that everybody has faith in the inquiry's ability and my ability to get to the bottom of this with all due speed. And that's why you must all trust me and the inquiry to handle what you tell us and tell me carefully and with great confidence. And there are mechanisms which I will set in train, whether it's another closed hearing or whether it's some other hearing, that you can speak to me and the inquiry team with your lawyers present in a completely secure surrounding. We've got quite a lot of the rest of your very detailed statement to go through. So unless there's anything that you'd like to say to me now or your counsel would like to say, that is how I'd like the position to lie for the moment. But I would like this issue to be dealt with, please, as rapidly as possible, because it is important that this inquiry proceeds at pace. There are a lot of allegations flying around, and as long as they are flying around, they are corrosive to everybody who might have a cloud hanging over them. So that is why I am very, very keen to secure the cooperation and confidence of everybody who comes before me. All right?
Sir.
Thank you. Mr. Glasgow.
Please, you, sir. Mr. Mercer, so that we are not confused about the evidence you gave before lunch, can I please check with you that the three people you've discussed matters with, that you'd mentioned to us, were the Chief of Defence Staff, is that correct?
Yep.
The Director of Judicial Engagement?
Yep.
And the Secretary of State?
Yep.
So Director of Judicial Engagement was Peter Ryan?
Yep.
Chief of Defence Staff, was that Sir Nick Carter?
Yep.
And the Secretary of State, of course, was Ben Wallace at the time?
Yep.
As part of your assurance to them that you would get to the bottom of what had happened, what did you decide to do?
Well, initially I engaged with Peter Ryan, Director of Judicial Engagement, and from him sort of flowed a series of requests for meetings, and that was included but not limited to Provost Marshal Navy, John Murphy, who was an external sort of Chief Constable Auditor of the inquiry, Director Special Forces, individuals like that.
Provost Marshal Navy, why did you speak to Provost Marshal Navy, please?
Because as I understood it, he was the sort of senior rank dealing with this.
And when you say with this, do you mean
With the whole with both Northmoor and the sort of complaints more broadly, because there was always the issue that I understood Northmoor when it was initially set up was looking at issues from 2014 onwards or 2013 onwards, and I was under the impression that two cases in particular that have been JR'd in this case were outside of that envelope. There was always that element of confusion as to whether they were in that envelope or outside that envelope. That question was never really answered to me, but Provost Marshal Navy was the sort of chief, card holder for investigating these issues, as I understood it at the time.
And were you reassured, following your conversations with him, about the investigation that was being undertaken?
Well, I was. I mean, I had a very public run-in with his predecessor during the inquiry into the Iraq Historical Allegations team because I felt that they were unprofessional. I felt that they had made matters worse, and essentially there was a level of incompetence that I wasn't prepared to accept. I was pleased to see the new Provost Marshal Navy in. Highlights of the conversation are hard to recollect. I'm sure there must be a note of it somewhere, but I asked him what he thought of the allegations, and to best of my recollection, he sort of said they had been investigated. At no stage was I made aware of what subsequently came out, that, for example, people were arrested and cases went to the Service Prosecuting Authority. That was never mentioned in those meetings.
Let's deal with what was mentioned rather than what wasn't
Yeah.
mentioned. Did he reassure you that matters had been investigated?
He reassured me that they had been investigated. I did not feel reassured.
So he assured you they had been investigated,
Yeah.
but you were not reassured by his words.
Yes.
Did he give any assessment to you as to whether there was any truth in the allegations that he said had been investigated?
I mean, very much. I don't have a lot of recollection of that meeting, but it was very much he was doing his job. I would never question his professionalism or integrity, and they had been investigated, and that there was kind of nothing more to say on the matter. I didn't at that stage pick apart the different individual sort of technical reasons as to why I was concerned with him. To the best of my recollection, that was more with John Hawkins. That was more with John Murphy.
So insofar as there was any assurance from Provost Marshal Navy, the assurance was that matters had been investigated.
Yeah.
And that there was nothing more to see here. Does it come to that?
Essentially, but I felt like he was saying that because he'd done his job, right? It wasn't. It didn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. When you're dealing with soldiers, you know, and sailors and airmen and women, you can tell if that's the end of the conversation, right? And it didn't give me a sort of warm fuzzy as to what was going on. But in a way, that didn't matter to me because I was then going to go to Hawkins and DJEP and DSF anyway. So
let's just deal with the other people with whom you spoke. You spoke to the Director of Special Forces.
I did.
And did that person give you an assurance that the allegations had been looked into?
Yes, I had a detailed conversation with him.
And did the Director of Special Forces give you any assurance as to whether there was or was not any truth in the allegations that had been investigated?
He didn't have the professional curiosity I expected him to have.
We'll deal with his lack or presence of professional curiosity in a moment. What I asked you was, did he give you any assurance that the allegations that had been investigated were or were not true?
It wasn't so much as were or were not true, is that there wasn't any evidence that they could find. So it wasn't professed an opinion, Minister, these are not true, or Minister, these are true. There is no evidence of this. There is no evidence to back up these claims, and this was the very crux of the problem.
When you had your conversation with the Chief of the General Staff, who must have been Mark Carlton-Smith?
So, Chief of Defence Staff.
No, your statement records the Chief of the General Staff. Would you like to look at paragraph 22, Mr.
Oh, sorry,
Mercer?
I thought we were talking about the initial conversations.
No, we weren't. We've moved on from there. It's
Okay.
my fault. You were telling us about the conversations you'd had with people after your initial conversations.
Right,
One
okay.
with Provost Marshal Navy,
Yep,
another with the Director of Special Forces, and
Yep.
the third with Chief of the General Staff.
yep,
It must be Mark Carlton-Smith.
correct, yeah.
Right. Did Mark Carlton-Smith assure you that the allegations had been looked into?
If I'm completely honest, I can't recollect what Mark Carlton-Smith said to me.
Well, how about looking at the last sentence of your paragraph 22, because you were completely clear when you wrote that statement and signed it in November last year. During all of my conversations with the Director of Special Forces and Chief of the General Staff, I was assured that the allegations had been investigated and were untrue.
Yeah, that's true, but the very
I'd hope so,
particular nature of the conversations, I can't recall. But that broad summation of them is true and accurate.
Again, Mr. Mercer, I'd not asked you for the detail of the conversations. I'd simply asked you of two things.
Well, you're asking me for specific words, aren't you? You're saying, did this individual say to you, this is not true? And I'm saying to you, I don't recall the specifics of that. But during all of my conversations, the broad reflection of that was that I was assured the allegations had been investigated and were untrue.
So your takeaway from your discussions with the Director of Special Forces and Chief of the General Staff was the allegations had been looked into and they were untrue?
Yes.
And did that set your mind at ease?
No.
Why not?
Because in the course of those conversations, I had asked specific questions as to why there was no evidence to disprove these allegations.
Well, there's a difference between no evidence to disprove and untrue. So let's just clear. They assured you the allegations were untrue. In other words, there was no truth in them.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So having spoken to the Director of UK Special Forces and the Chief of the General Staff, both of whom separately told you this has been looked at and there's no truth in the allegations, you did not have a warm and fuzzy feeling.
No, because that wasn't the only aspect of the conversation. So during that conversation, we talked about a number of issues around the actual investigation. I remember this specifically with DSF, less so with CGS, Mark Carlton Smith, but I remember specifically with DSF, we had specific conversations about the recording of evidence of these operations where there would have been opportunities to disprove these allegations that did not now exist, and that made me feel very uncomfortable because there was no plausible reason for that evidence not to exist.
You had discussions with representatives from Operation Northmoor. If it helps, look at the first sentence of paragraph 22. I received a briefing from officials in relation to Operation Northmoor.
Yeah, not representatives from
So you didn't speak to anyone from Op North?
I don't remember doing that, but it says here I received a briefing from officials in relation to Op Northmoor. That's what happened. DJEP.
Did you speak to Sir John Murphy, who was providing?
Yeah, but he was an independent chief constable brought in for
external advice.
Yeah, so he wasn't part of it.
Did you want to speak with people directly involved in the investigation to satisfy yourself, as you've been asked to do by the Secretary of State, that there was nothing to see here?
I think I'm not sure that would have been appropriate because they wouldn't have been able to answer my very specific questions around evidence. So, would it have been useful? Probably. But as a minister, you expect to be able to deal with the kind of heads of sheds of these different lines of command. For example, DJEP and Provost Marshal Navy and CGS and CDS and DSF, and have that integrity in that process without having to then backpick into those organisations. And I think that was a fair assessment to make.
So at the time that you left your various meetings, do I understand that you were still of the view that there was something to investigate with Op Northmoor and that there might be truth in the allegations?
Something to investigate with Northmoor. I came away from those meetings with very serious concerns about why evidence that I had asked to see, or any evidence indeed, that would help us disprove these allegations did not exist. That was the specific point of my concern.
Did you go back to the Secretary of State and say, I've met with a number of people, I've tried to get to the bottom of the position, I've been told there's nothing to see here, but I have very real concerns?
I said I did not believe DSF and CGS.
when you told the Secretary of State that you didn't believe the Director of Special Forces or the Chief of the General Staff, what did you tell him you didn't believe in what they'd said to you?
I told him that I did not believe there was nothing there. I told him that I did not believe their accounts as to why there was no full motion video of any of the 10 operations that had been selected at random by John Murphy. I did not believe the accounts of the call-out procedure and the behaviour of detainees on target that was recounted again and again and again, and I did not believe that no one could remember any of the operations that they'd been asked. And as an integrity shout, being asked to sign that off, I didn't believe them. So maybe my fault, but I didn't believe them, and I couldn't believe them, and my integrity wouldn't allow me to say that I did.
So your take back to the Secretary of State was that, having been tasked by him to get to the bottom of this, you could not agree with what you were being told and you wouldn't sign off on it as accurate.
Correct. I think my words were something stinks.
And when you advised the Secretary of State that the allegations that were being made about UKSF-1 were in effect not being looked at properly, what was his response, if any?
So the Secretary of State was concerned, but the Secretary of State was certainly, I guess, we had a testy relationship at times, but I felt we kind of balanced each other out quite well. He was certainly more of the view that, well, there is no new evidence, Johnny. There is no new evidence. This has been thoroughly investigated. And that wasn't the point I was making. The point I was making was very clear in that there should be something to refute these allegations, just something to refute these allegations. The absence of anything is what pricks your conscience. It's like when you're it's hard to explain, right? But when you're in Afghanistan, you're looking for IEDs, okay? You're looking for the presence of the abnormal and the absence of the normal, to understand what's going on, to try and ascertain where these things are all the time. And that's what happened with this. There was the absence of the normal and the presence of the abnormal.
Did you ask to be provided with something to show you the source of the allegations?
I did.
In other words, you wanted to know how it was that UKSF-1 were being accused of engaging people on target when they didn't pose a threat.
I did.
When you asked to be shown the evidence, what was the response?
So a note was brought up to my office with an official. I was made to sign some.
For a moment,
I'm so sorry. I didn't
It's
hear.
my fault. Can I just check? When did you ask once or more than once before the note arrived?
Oh, I had to press the point. Oh, yeah, I had to press the point. As you can see from before lunch, I was trying to be gamed out of this, right? So I had to ask a number of times.
So you asked a number of times, and someone came to your office. And
Eventually, an individual came to my office, a senior official. I had to sign a bit of paper, and then I was shown this. It was essentially a piece of paper. So it's actually there's a.
You'll find it in Divider 1 if you're looking.
Thank you. There's a version of this note in Divider 1, but it wasn't in that format. When I saw it, it was printed off on what I would describe as a Word document. That is military staff writing. It wasn't in that format, but it broadly said pretty much the same thing.
Can I again interrupt you for a moment so that others who are trying to follow, the exhibit reference of the document I've just directed your attention to is the MOD Exhibit 198-000-1587. That's 198-000-1587. The document's been brought up on the screen. You have a hard copy available to you in tab 1. And if I've just understood what you said, the text that you looked at is not the same format as what we have here, but the content is the same.
Correct.
Right. Now, it's a document that's dated in the top left. If we just scroll up, I'm so sorry. 5th of April 2011. Identified for the attention of the DSF, Director Special Forces. And then if we look to the body of the text, which you're familiar with, allegations of EJK by UKSF, so allegations of extrajudicial killing by UK Special Forces. My apologies for not raising this with you during my leaving call, but I was still formulating my thoughts and our truncated meeting didn't seem the right moment. And I'm going to pause for a moment and just check this. At the bottom of the document, there is the cipher for the individual who wrote this note, which is N1785, the commanding officer of UK SF3. And I see you've opened the gist sheet. Can I please don't say any name at all, Mr. Mercer? The version that you looked at, did it have a name on it?
Of course.
And does the name accord with the name that's alongside the cipher for N7185? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that is the same.
1785, thank you. I
that's
got the
correct
numbers the
name.
wrong way round. Thank you.
That's correct.
So, and then we'll begin again at paragraph 2. I have for some time been aware of rumours within UKSF3 that UK SF1 subunits have been conducting summary executions of supposed Taliban affiliates on target in Afghanistan. I'll pause whilst you look at something else. I don't want to read on.
No, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Until very recently, I have not reported this any further and cautioned my team against peddling malicious speculation. However, I've now been given more information of a nature which makes me seriously concerned for the reputation of UKSF. One of my team, an officer, has been told by an individual from UKSF1 that there is, in effect, an unofficial policy amongst the UKSF1 subunits to kill, wherever possible, fighting-aged males on target, regardless of the immediate threat they pose to our troops. In some instances, this has involved the deliberate killing of individuals after they've been restrained by the subunit and the subsequent fabrication of evidence to suggest a lawful killing in self-defence. What I've been told does not amount to anything as substantial as evidence, but to my sense, it is more than just what had been, until recently, vacuous rumour. But if UKSF individuals are conducting EJKs, then the implications are clearly stark. Notwithstanding this, I feel most strongly that thorough, appropriate investigation is warranted. To be frank, I do not know what to do next, and to that end, I'd welcome your assessment on how you think we should proceed. I'm sorry to have to bring this to you at what is already such a busy time. Rest assured, I have only been aware of this issue for several days, not longer, and that I feel I needed to pass on my concerns before I leave post as Commanding Officer UKSF3 and before I assume command of SFHQ Afghanistan.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Yep.
This document, written in April of 2011, was shown to you for the first time, certainly either in 2019 or possibly early 2020.
Yeah, about that time.
So you now have seen a document from the commanding officer of UK SF3 written to the Director of Special Forces, which records in the body of that document that he, the commanding officer of UK SF3, has been made aware of an allegation reported by an officer to the effect individuals are being engaged on target when they pose no threat.
Yes.
And also it would appear that there's been a fabrication of evidence.
Yes. Well, that's what it says.
That must have chimed with the information that you had received from the people whose identities you don't want to disclose.
Indeed.
And in particular, it chimed with a number of different strands. First, the engagement of individuals who pose no threat.
Yep.
Second, it engaged the allegation that something might have been done in the aftermath to cover this up.
Yep.
You've spoken about the changes to documents and the like.
Yep.
And also it possibly chimed with the information you'd had from somebody firsthand that they had been asked to carry a throwdown which you understood might be used to plant on the body of a deceased to in some way justify that person's killing.
Well, the fabrication of evidence to suggest a lawful killing is very broad. There's many things you can do,
But it
and those are two of the ones that have been brought to my attention.
So, on reading this document, it immediately chimed with information you had received from friends and from trusted sources, and it also echoed the pallor and the odour that you had become aware of at a time when you had been trying to join UKSF.
Correct.
So, in and around the end of 2019, early 2020, you now have a document from the commanding officer of UKSF 3, which echoes information you've been receiving for a period of about 12 years.
Yes.
And prior to the I generally regard it as not the first time.
No more than usual.
Never. Well, that's okay. I like a solid continuation of stupidity.
Mr. Glasgow, I gather that a particular name was mentioned at 14:46:44 in the transcript inadvertently, of course. I order that that name be removed from the transcript
Thank you, sir.
and be replaced with the cipher 1785. My restriction order remains in place in relation to that name. The transcript will be published in due course.
Insofar as the temporary restriction order was imposed over the entire 10-minute period, do we take it that that's now been lifted, save insofar as it relates to the name that's been replaced by the cipher?
Indeed, it's been, I lift it and replace it with the specific restriction order in relation to the name at 14:46:44.
Sir, thank you very much.
All right, anything else I need to do?
No, thank you, sir.
But well, these things, since happen from time to time, I'm grateful for everybody dealing with it quickly. I gather the intention is now to try and sit to finish, and I'm very happy to take a second break later on.
Sir, thank you very much indeed.
But let's see how we go, shall we?
To indicate to Mr. Mercer, who wasn't party to any discussion, the idea is that we'll sit from now to about 4 o'clock, have another short break, and then to sit through until just before 5 in the hope that we can finish your evidence, sir, today. I'm sure that's something that you would prefer. If it becomes very obvious that I'm not going to do that, I won't hold everyone here till 5 o'clock. I'll make it clear much earlier than that.
I think the gate shut at 5, so that's an incentive, and I'm sure that you, Mr. Mercer, would like to finish today. So we'll do everything we can to do that.
Thank you, sir.
All right?
I should make it clear, of course, that there'll still be the issue that you've been asked to reflect
Yes,
on.
of course.
So that's an entirely separate matter outside of the evidence
Yes.
that I'm asking you about now. Now then, Mr. Mercer, you told us before we had the short break that having asked on a number of occasions for the source of the allegations, and in particular who had first raised them, that you were then shown the document at your tab 1 that I took you through.
Yeah.
I'd asked you whether you then raised the content of that document with either the DSF, with the Chief of the General Staff, or indeed with the Secretary of State. You'd said that you believe you would have spoken to the Secretary of State, although he was difficult to get hold of because he was very busy. Is that fair?
Yes.
That, do you remember whether you did or did not raise it with the Director of Special Forces?
I can't remember if I raised the note. I raised a lot of issues with him. I can't specifically remember the note.
And did you raise the note with the Chief of General Staff, Mark Carlton-Smith?
Same answer.
Other than being shown that one document, were you shown any other documents in response to your request what the source of the allegations was?
No.
Did you ask whether it was possible to see any of the full motion video of the detention operations?
I did.
Why did you believe there would be full motion video available for you to review?
So, as I understood it, in terms of auditing up Northmoor and some of these allegations, Chief Constable John Murphy had selected 10 operations at random, and he was informed that there was no FMV available for any of those 10 operations. Now, full motion video became a statutory requirement to conduct these operations after a particular operation in believe it was around 2006 that didn't go too well. It is literally a go, no-go criteria. There will be a number of platforms that have additional FMV capabilities assisting operations like this. It was simply not plausible to try and ask me to believe that there was nothing available for each of these 10 operations selected at random.
Insofar as full motion video is a go or no-go requirement, as you've just described it, what was your understanding of what happens to the full motion video at the end of an operation?
Well, look, you have to, firstly, there's the way it comes into the operations room. It's piped in through one of the feeds. When I was there, we then recorded it onto a subsequent device at the same time, so that if we were monitoring a target and you think you've seen something, you can then go back to your secondary tape, rewind it, and check what you've actually seen. For example, a handover of something, or individuals travelling in cars and so on. You needed to be able to go back and look at that. So there were those 2 copies in the ops room. Secondarily, I would have to prepare what are called storyboards and so on, and they would have video clips in them to assist in the kind of explanation of the operation in post-operation reports.
Who was it who told you that the full motion video was not available?
John Murphy.
Did you raise with him the matters that you've just given in evidence, namely that your understanding was that it was a go or no-go requirement and that it would be separately recorded on at least one, if not more than one device?
I did. I raised that with him. I raised that with Secretary of State, and I raised that with Director of Special Forces.
Dealing with each of those in turn then, when you raised those concerns with Sir John Murphy, who was one of the independent assessors for Operation Northmoor, what, if any, response did he give to you?
He said, I can't do anything about that. That's as far as I can go.
Did he appear to share your concerns, or did he appear to have accepted the explanation that the full motion video was not available?
He appeared to accept the explanation that full motion video was not available for any of the 10 operations he selected at random that he asked to have a look at.
When you raised that with the Secretary of State, the same questions, please. What, if any, was the reaction of Ben Wallace when you told him about the full
He
motion
repeatedly
video?
told me that there was no new evidence. I said to him that it is not a plausible explanation to me to say that we have no FMV, or that the FMV is in America, or we are unable to retrieve any FMV of any of these 10 operations selected at random that could help us understand the atmospherics, the sort of type of operation and the tactics and the techniques and procedures that were being used in that operation. The idea that none of that existed was a significant concern to me. The Secretary of State, he's a busy man. I don't think he really understood the gravity of that.
When you say he didn't understand the gravity of it, what you think that Ben Wallace didn't understand the seriousness of your suggestion that there must be full motion video available, therefore the claim it doesn't exist is implausible?
Yeah, I don't think he understood the gravity of that.
Did he offer any reason to you why he accepted the explanation, as you appear to suggest he did do, that full motion video was not available?
No. Sorry, no.
No, I'm so sorry, I didn't hear.
No,
you.
I'm sorry.
I apologise. Can I ask about the conversation or conversations you had about this subject with the Director of Special Forces?
Yeah, I mean, I said to him, where is this stuff? I want to bat for you. I want to help you. Where is this stuff? I remember he leant back and went like that.
So apart from leaning back and apparently shrugging his shoulders and holding his hands out, did he offer any explanation to you as to where this material was?
It's not available, Johnny.
Did you press him on that?
I made clear to him that it wasn't plausible. It was not a plausible explanation to me.
And when you told the Director of Special Forces that what he was saying to you was not plausible, what, if anything, was his response?
I seem to remember they started challenging me on, because he was with another individual who was a senior enlisted rank within UKSF, sort of challenging me on whether or not FMV was a go or no go criteria, which it was. And then, there was an attempt to sort of challenge as to why I'd be interested in this. And I kept repeatedly saying that I wasn't interested in, I understand the nature of these operations, and you're not going to see, for want of a better phrase, a smoking gun and something happening, but you can get a generic feel for an operation and what's going on. I wanted to see that in order to, have the integrity to stand in the House of Commons and stand up for him and his unit.
To your mind, was the full motion video a potentially important piece of evidence that might point in favour or against the honesty and accuracy of the allegations that were being made?
Of course, it's absolutely critical.
So, the most critical?
If it was my unit, and there was no FMV available for 10 operations selected at random by an external chief constable, I'd have ripped the place apart to find out what was going on. Because if they're not telling me the truth on that, what else are they not telling me the truth about? It is not plausible to tell me that nothing exists. There are all sorts of other things you can say, but you can't tell me it doesn't exist, because it exists somewhere.
So when the Secretary of State, Chief of the General Staff, and the Director of Special Forces each told you the same thing that was, in your opinion, completely implausible, did you place any faith in anything else they told you?
Well, no. I mean, look, I don't believe people lie to me as a minister. I don't believe people lie and get out of bed in the morning to do wrong and cover up. I am still surprised to this day that there wasn't that intellectual curiosity or command curiosity to find out what had been going on. Because for me, in the military, you have all this, people go on about values and standards and integrity and all this stuff, right? But it's precisely for these reasons, so that you know everything, you know what's going on. It's about you have to be able to trust each other and trust what's going on in the system. And the truth is, that trust was broken at that stage, yeah. And I then struggled to believe much more of what was said around the issue.
Leaving aside the question, therefore, of whether you did or did not place any trust in what was being said to you about the issue,
yeah.
You've been asked by the Secretary of State to get to the bottom of the situation. Did you continue to do that?
Yeah, I did. So let me just get the timelines right in my head. I did a number of things. I looked at the procedures that were operated on target, and something called the call-out procedure. I became aware, I'm not sure how I became aware of it, but I became aware of the sort of TTPs that were used on target by that unit. And again, this was the slow. So that initial, there's no FMV available, to me, was the alarm bell. That's when, right? And then a series of creeping things happen. Another one is the TTP, and asking me to believe a series of unbelievable events that happened a number of times, unbelievable behaviours from detained personnel in Afghanistan. Well, I'm not going to believe them anyway, but certainly on top of having no FMV available, I'm not going to believe them. And then all these things build up into a position where you're like, you guys are not telling me the truth.
And insofar as you were conducting your own inquiry or investigation, other than looking at documentation that you requested to look at, did you speak to individuals? And can I give you this assurance at the moment? I'm not about to ask you to name somebody. So, did you speak to any individuals for their assistance in understanding what might or might not have happened?
Of course.
And did you speak to members within the SF community?
Of course.
Did you reach out to your own contacts?
Yes.
And therefore you had conversations with people you know
Yes.
about the concerns that you then had? And was this with a view to trying to get to the truth?
It was all about getting to the truth. It was all about getting to the truth. I've always, I mean, we can come on to this later, but all I'm interested in is the truth. I think, at this juncture, when as we go down this path and you look at certainly what's happened in Australia and so on, I think,
Thank you for drawing that to my attention, Mr. O'Connor. My restriction order will remain in place in relation to everything said from 15:28:00 to 15:35:59 until the transcript is published.
So thank you very much. Mr. Mercer, you'd identified therefore to us a number of concerns about the allegations themselves and the explanation that have been provided to them, concerns about the failure of people to recall what had happened, what a judge had described as collective amnesia, and concerns about the fact that on a number of occasions it appeared that the number of people killed significantly exceeded the number of weapons that had been found on target. Did you raise those concerns with everyone that you could?
I mean, to be honest with you, Mr. Glasgow, I mean, I didn't go around talking about it with everybody I could, and I couldn't tell you, hand on heart, if I raised every single one of those concerns with every single individual. I made it very clear to those relevant individuals, such as the Secretary of State, CGS, CDS, and DSF, of my concerns that encompassed those four clear strands in paragraph 27.
Insofar as you saw the implausibility, as you've described it, as having an impact on anything else you were trying to do, did you consider that there was any need to advise anyone about potential risks to your work if you were being given implausible explanations for things that you thought simply...
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I said to the Secretary of State that, you know, whilst I wasn't a sort of investigator or a police officer, and in some ways, whether I believe these things or not was not relevant in some ways because it wasn't my job. What was relevant was that we were being asked to carry political risk for bringing in legislation that was clearly contentious, and that eventually, when all is said and done with all these issues, the names on the tin for all this stuff come back to the ministers. And it would be me, predominantly, and Ben Wallace, whose names would be around this legislation. And ultimately, if this played out and the legislation came in and we protect all these people from lawfare, but also it was then shown that we couldn't investigate serious allegations like this, that is not, the political risk of that is not acceptable, and it is not something I would try and get to a position of.
And given the implausible explanations that you had been offered for some of the concerns you'd raised, did you have confidence in the ongoing investigation?
I mean, by that stage, I think Northmoor, they decided Northmoor was going to come to an end.
Did you have any confidence that Northmoor's findings would withstand scrutiny?
Well, no, because I gave them a bit of, you know, my deeply unqualified, uneducated scrutiny had been unable to, they hadn't been able to satisfy me, who is, you know, the number one defender of these people. So how on earth was that going to survive contact with the public domain?
So to your mind, the process that had been put in place, was it an effective one or not?
I think they did the best they could with the knowledge and the envelope they were asked to operate in. Yeah, I wouldn't criticise them because unless you knew, for example, that FMV was a go, no-go criteria, you wouldn't stick your hand up and say, why is there literally no platform with any FMV available for any operations selected at random by John Murphy? I do think somebody else should have picked that up. Yeah, of course. But not one of the investigators who was, you know, on the ground doing it. Someone at command level should have thought, there's something not quite right here.
Someone say at DSF level should have pointed it out, do you think?
Well, of course, but, you know, he had seemingly satisfied himself that there was nothing here.
You didn't believe him.
I didn't believe him, no, and I don't know what people want me to do about that. I'm just being honest with you. I didn't believe him. I've never believed that version of events, and I said that to everybody who asked me. I said the same thing in public and in private, that I did not believe the accounts that were presented to me of these operations.
Can I just ask you to look in your statement? Are you still on page 11?
I'm on 10. I'm now on 11.
Paragraph 30. At this stage, although I was very concerned, I maintained my faith in the process that had been set up by the MOD to properly and fully investigate these allegations.
Yeah.
Given what you've just told us a moment ago, can that be right?
Well, I mean, I did have faith in them because, you know, there's lots of context here. You know, when I came into all this and came into politics and came into the department, you know, I came in, you know, initially when you're starting down this track of improving things like veterans care, everyone's very supportive. When you actually get into the weeds of it and you're like, well, you know, people shouldn't really pay for their own prosthetics and stuff like that, you start to hit a bit of resistance and you feel like a bit of an outsider. And that, you know, that then colours your judgment on things like this, because you don't want to be a stick in the mud for every issue. You don't want to be, you know, well, I'm sorry, but I just don't accept this. I had faith in the processes and in what was going on in the Ministry of Defence, and people who were more experienced, more qualified, better officers than me when they were in, and better ministers than me, senior ministers to me at the time. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the professional thing was to put my hand up, say, look, I'm not happy and I don't believe this, but I'm a professional minister and I will go with your direction.
Mr. Mercer, you just told the inquiry that you believe the DSF was lying to you.
I've never said anybody lied to me.
You just said that you didn't believe. What did
Correct.
you say? You didn't believe what the...
Yeah, and that is different. I've never said anybody lied to me. I've been very clear on that, Mr.
So you
Glasgow.
didn't believe the DSF when he told you there was no FMV?
I did not believe that there was no FMV available, yep.
But you had faith in the process?
I had faith that maybe I was wrong. I had faith that...
What do you mean?
I guess I had faith that the system and the structure and the organisation was bigger than me. And in some ways, you begin to think, maybe I've got this all wrong.
Can I remind you of what you told the inquiry this morning, Mr. Mercer, and these are your words? I had very little faith that the MOD had the ability to hold itself to account.
Yep.
That's what you said earlier
Yep.
today. How do you square that observation with what is written in your statement, where you profess to have had faith in the process?
Because I had little faith in it, but I felt like I had to have faith in what was going on at the time. Look, at the end of the day, I was the only one calling this out. And at some stage, publicly and at a senior level, and it's, if nobody else thinks there's an issue here, you're left with, a couple of options. One is which you resign and leave. The other is you try and fight through all the other issues you're doing as a politician or as a minister, which I was doing at the time. And I decided that on balance, provided there were no further disclosure issues or information came to boot, that I would just have to swallow this, sit on it. I was a junior minister at the time, and support Secretary of State and DSF and the senior officers in the MOD.
Well,
that was a decision I made at the time.
The Secretary of State had specifically tasked you to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I came back with my findings, and he decided that we would carry on as we were.
So when you say you came back with your findings, do you mean you reported to him that you believed that what you were being told was utterly implausible? I
said that I did not believe what I was being told, yeah.
And his response to that was what, please, Mr. Mercer?
There is no new evidence. But this has been investigated. John Murphy's had a look at it. I don't know what else we can do, Johnny.
You record in your statement that in late 2019, you were aware of more significantly serious allegations that were being made by the Sunday Times and BBC Panorama in a joint investigation?
Are you referring to paragraph 33?
I am, yes.
Thank you.
The matter that you were concerned about, as had been reported, included a reference to alleged death squads.
Yep.
Have you had a chance to refresh your memory of that?
Yes, yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
ready to go.
Right. What was it about the reporting in late 2019 of allegations that there had been death squads that you didn't accept?
The premise was that I did not believe in a professional unit like that death squads could operate unencumbered. And I did not believe that it could. That was a kind of, you know, there would have to be some degree of turning a blind eye to a level that I didn't really believe could exist. And so I thought those allegations were a step too far. I was very concerned at that stage. I remained very concerned, particularly around the killing of children. And I remember very clearly thinking in my mind at that time, and it was a very difficult time, and, you know, I felt very, very torn as to what I should do. Because ultimately you have to decide what side you're on. You're either on the side of people who, you know, whatever happened on these operations, kids ended up dead,
Glasgow, I gather there have been some discussions, and the general consensus is that it's been a long day, particularly for the shorthand writers, and that it may be sensible now to, given the hour, 4:30, to draw stumps for today.
So yes, I'm not confident that if we began now, I'd conclude the evidence in time for everyone to get out through the gate before 5 o'clock.
Although I didn't tell everybody, I do have a pass to the side gate because we could stay till midnight.
Mr. Mercer has discussed the matter with his legal team, and he has kindly made himself available for us first thing tomorrow morning, so he could return at 10 o'clock. And we've made arrangements for Mark Nichol to be contacted so that his evidence will start, we anticipate, at 11:30, which will allow Mr. Mercer's evidence to conclude within about an hour, and then there will be a break in the morning before we turn to the next chapter of evidence.
Well, Mr. Mercer, that's very helpful. Thank you. We'll break now until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody, for your attention today, and particularly to the shorthand writers and the court staff. Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming today to give your evidence. I repeat the same warning that I do to all witnesses. Please don't discuss your evidence with anybody overnight, unless it's on the topic that your counsel discussed with you over lunch. Anything else I need to deal with, Mr. Glasgow?
No, thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you all. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, please.